Prynhawn da i chi gyd, a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein gwemina heddi i baratoi i ddarparu'r gymhwyster cynnydd yn adeiladwaith a pheiriannau gwasanaethau adeiladu. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for joining us for our webinar on how to prepare to deliver the progression qualification in construction and building services engineering. Rydym i gyd yn gweithio adre, felly ymddeiriadau ymlaen llaw am unrhyw sŵn yn y cefndir ac unrhyw oedi yn y sleidiau. As we are all working from home, and I apologise in advance for any background noise and any delay in the slides. Hwn yw'r un gyntaf mewn cyfres o webinarau i baratoi dysgu y gymhwyster yma o fis Medi eleni. Diolch mawr iawn i chi am y rhai ymunodd gyda ni yn y webinarau blaenorol. Mae bob recordiad ar wefan Sgiliau i Gymru. This is the first in a series of webinars to help you prepare to deliver the progression qualification from September 2021. Thank you to you all who joined the Foundation webinars. All recordings can be found on the Skills for Wales website. Fe fydd webinar arall dydd Iau am 10 o'r gloch yn union yr un peth ar webinar yma heddi. Fe fyddwn yn eich annog i chi gael eich cydweithwyr i ymuno yn y webinar yma. Yna ar ôl Pasg, fe fyddwn yn dechrau cyfres o webinarau ar y meysydd masnach unigol. Gallwch gyfrestru am y webinarau yma ar wefan Sgiliau i Gymru. There will be another webinar on Thursday, which is exactly the same as this one. I would urge you to encourage your colleagues to join. After Easter, there will be a series of webinars on the individual trade-specific areas. The links to register on these webinars can be found on the Skills for Wales website. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn e-bost cyn diwedd y webinar gyda lincyn harolwg a'r PowerPoint yma yn y Gymraeg a'r Saesneg. Byddem yn ddiolchgar iawn byddech yn cymeryd yr amser i lenwi ein harolwg, gan bod eich adborth yn werthfawr iawn i ni. You will receive an email before the session ends with a link to a survey and also the PowerPoint in English and Welsh. We would be very grateful if you take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. Dyma beth byddwn ni'n mynd trwyddo y brynhawn yma. Byddwn yn rhoi y cyflwyniadau i chi, gan esbonio pam mae gennym ni y gymwysterau newydd yma, ac yna yn edrych ar gynnwys y gymwyster cynnydd, yna symud mlaen i edrych ar strwythur yr unedau ac yn rhoi amlinelliad o'r asesiadau. Yna fe fyddwn yn edrych ar yr adnoddau fydd ar gael i chi cyn symud ymlaen at y camau nesaf, y broses gymeradwyo eich canolfan, y trefnadau trosiannol, ac yna i gloi fe fyddwn yn rhoi y cyfle i chi ofyn unrhyw gwestiwn i ni. Plis rhowch eich cwestiynau yn y tab cwestiynau sydd ar llaw dde o'ch sgrin. This is what we'll be discussing this afternoon. We will be going over the transformation of these new qualifications. We will then look at the foundation qualification content, structure of the units, and outline of the assessments. We will then have a look at the resources that will be made available for you before moving on to the next step. We will then go over the approval journey and look at the transition arrangements that are in place. And then there will be an opportunity for you to ask us any questions. Please type in any questions that you have throughout this webinar in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. Dyma i chi eich cyflwynwyr heddi. Here are your presenters today. We have David Pye, who's the Technical Advising for Building Services at City and Guilds. We have Kevin Sparrow, who's the Electrical Product Specialist at EAL. We have Ian Roberts, who's the Technical Advisor for Construction at City and Guilds. We have Jason Marsland, who's the Plumbing and Heating Product Specialist at EAL. We also have Susan Beattie, who's the Nation's Quality Manager at City and Guilds, and myself, Angharad Lloyd-Bainan, who's the Business Manager for City and Guilds. Nawn ni symud mlaen nawr i gael pôl sydyn i wael y dealltwriaeth chi am y cymwysterau newydd yma. We will have a quick poll now to get your understanding of the new progression qualification. If you can see the called question there, os gallwch chi ateb y cwestiwn gyda 5 y rhif uchaf a 1 yr un isaf. So if you could answer the question with 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. Felly sut byddech yn disgrifio eich dealltwriaeth o'r gymhwyster cynnydd? So how would you rate your understanding of the foundation qualification? Na I roi chydig o eiliadau i chi roi cyfle i chi ateb. Just give you a few more seconds to give you a chance to answer. Felly gweld yr atebion yn dod mewn. Grêt, diolch yn fawr. Chi'n gallu gweld yr atebion ar y sgrin fan'na. Diolch i chi. Thank you very much. You can see the answers on the screen there. Hoffwn nawr eich trosglwyddo i Kevin Sparrow a fydd yna eich tywysg trwy y sleidiau nesaf. I would like to now pass you over to Kevin Sparrow, who will take you through the next few slides. Diolch, Kevin.
Thank you, Anne Harrod. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Sparrow, Electrical Product Specialist at EAL. So what I want to do now is just give you an overview of the sector in terms of the need for the review. So this is just really a recap. So in February 2018, Qualification Wales published the Building the Future report, which was a sector review of qualifications and the qualification system in construction and the built environment in Wales. The report summarised the view of learning providers and a range of professional and representative bodies, together with more than 100 employers and over 900 learners. It included findings from their own review of a sample of qualifications and an international comparison study. Qualifications Wales outlined findings were, inconsistent assessment practice. So assessment is often not well managed and quality assurance can be inconsistent. Some areas of learning are not effectively assessed, so it brings into question the validity of the qualifications and its outcomes. If learners are not being assessed on skills and knowledge and understanding in a meaningful and consistent manner. There is a need for learners to deal with a range of tasks and to be able to problem solve, which we have now incorporated into the new qualifications with planning, evaluation, reflective practice, and intra and interpersonnel skills. Learners will now get a better understanding also of interactions between trades. There was also a need for the qualifications to meet the skills needs of Wales, such as heritage and traditional materials and buildings, tools and techniques, and how they have changed over time, together with new and emerging technologies in trades. The content and design of current qualifications means that learners can miss out on the skills and techniques that they need to meet the needs of employers across Wales. Qualifications currently do not always meet the needs of employers or the economy, and some are considered to be outdated, irrelevant, or inadequate. There is also a need to rationalise the amount of 400 plus technical vocational qualifications in the construction and built environment sector, and a need for having coherence among those qualifications. The current offering for this sector is complex with repetition and unclear progression routes. So the other key aspect is we need to keep portability between nations. So the consortium, City and Guilds and EAL have been working closely with sector bodies to facilitate this using recognised standards for each trade. So how we have responded to this, we are developing qualifications which implement the findings from the review. So the new suite of qualifications will be valid, so industry can be confident the learners have achieved a meaningful qualification. So as I previously mentioned, we've engaged with a wide range of stakeholders, including employers, learning providers and sector bodies, and used recognised standards for each trade. Reliability of qualifications, fair and consistent assessments across all trades, as all trades are assessed in the same way and use the same mechanisms, it's easier to see outcomes between learners across different trades. Flexibility and manageability with the timing and location of assessments and delivery, There is now a greater role for employers in planning and supporting assessments. There is now rationalisation of multiple ongoing assessments, meaning tutors can focus on the quality of delivery and a more holistic approach with practical projects, discussions, and on-screen assessments, providing consistency across trades. Support as well, making tutors and assessors' roles more manageable. So we are creating delivery resources, which we'll look at in further detail towards the end of the presentation. And planning and flexibility to allow providers to schedule own program of delivery, again with the resources for the new suite. So stakeholder engagement, in developing our new qualifications, we've worked with a number of different stakeholders, so technical consultants across Wales, technical working groups such as the plumbing focus group, stakeholder forums and BAC, current practitioners across Wales, industry including micro, small, medium and large contractors across the sector. So I've been speaking to employers in the electrical and heating and ventilation sectors, together with the IET, ECA, and colleagues have been doing similar across their own trade areas. Agreement through working with Qualifications Wales and their technical experts.
We're just experiencing a slight technicality at this moment in time, so if you could bear with us, please. Kevin, have you come back?
Hi, can you hear me?
Now, Kevin, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please, Ian. Okay, apologies about that, lost the connection there. This is really to look at the 4 columns underpinning the change. So starting from left to right, we've already looked at the context for the change from the Building the Future report and how the sector needed to be reformed. Moving across, we've got the employers and trade association sector bodies will have a better understanding of the qualifications due to the rationalisation of the 400 plus qualifications and having clear routes into apprenticeships aligned to skills card. Delivery centres, the third from the left there, you will be instrumental in delivering the vision operationally at centres with a simpler, modern and standardised approach. Parents and learners, promoting the sector in both practical and academic routes. Learners will hold valid qualifications with real value, developing learner skills not only in their trade but in new exciting areas relevant to the needs of Wales and beyond. Next slide, please, Ian. So this webinar, we're going to focus on the progression qualifications highlighted there in red. So these will be operational from September 21. We've got progression qualification in construction and the progression qualification in building services engineering. But there is also going to be dual running of the current or soon to be legacy qualifications to provide centres more time to prepare, as we've all been affected by the pandemic. From September 2022, the level 3 qualifications in construction and building services engineering will become operational. Also, just to mention, the awarding body WJC will be offering the GCSE in the built environment. So I think this is my final slide. So questions you may have about the change. What does the qualification cover? There's some information here on the slides to really give you some information around this, but essentially it's for learners in full-time education. There's 540 guided learning hours, but it could be delivered to evening students or indeed adults that wanted to retrain. And as previously mentioned, these qualifications enable learners to come from the foundation qualification, and then hopefully move into more industry recognised qualifications. Thank you, Ian. Okay, so this is, we looked at previously at the qualifications, and this just shows the timeline of the qualifications we've been looking at and the 3 types of learner profiles. So option A, this type of learner from September 2021 can undertake the foundation in construction and building services engineering, and in 2022 undertake the progression qualification in construction or building services engineering. In learner profile B could do a broad level 1, such as a current, electrical or plumbing or construction qualification, or the foundation qualification from 2021, and also move from 2022 into the 540 GLH progression qualification in construction and building services, and then hopefully move into an apprenticeship after that. Option C, from 2022, this will be learners who typically leave school and move straight into an apprenticeship. So they're the 3 learner profiles and the sort of time frames around those. Thank you, Ian. I'll now hand over to my colleague Jason Marsland, who's going to give you some more details on the qualifications. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Jason Marsland. I'm a product specialist from EAL. So now what I'm going to look at is the qualification content. So on this one now, we've got the 3 qualifications down there. So we've got the foundation and the core. We've got the progression, which is obviously what we're focusing on today, and the apprenticeship level 3. Now, what I want to look at initially is just the trades that are within them. So if we look at the foundation and the core, we've got working with brick, block and stone, wood occupations, decorative finishing and industrial painting, plastering and interior systems, roofing occupations, construction civil engineering, wall and floor tiling, plant operations, plumbing, heating and ventilation, and the electrotechnical. We then move over into the progression. So if we bear in mind at foundation, we'll pick 2 of those, and on the core one that goes to level 3, they'll just focus on 1. When we move into the progression, they're now going to focus on 1 of the trades. So within the construction, we have bricklaying, architectural joinery, site carpentry, timber frame erection, painter, solid plastering, dry lining, roof, slate and tiler, civil operations, groundworks, and then with the building services engineering, we have plumbing and heating, and the electrotechnical systems and equipment installation. Moving them forward into the level 3, we have dry lining, roof, slate and tiler, civil operations, groundworks, plant operations, which has now come in. It was in the foundation core. It wasn't in progression, but it is now in the level 3. We have bricklaying, architectural joinery, site carpenter, timber frame erection, painter and decorator, wall and floor tiling, which again is something new from the progression, and then solid plastering. Then within building services, we have heating and vent craftsperson, heating and vent installer. Both of those are the new ones that are included into level 3. And then you have plumbing and heating and electrotechnical installation. So as I say, we're going to focus on the progression. So could I please have the next slide, Ian? Okay, so now what we've got is the rule of combination. So if you look at the rule of combination there, we have 2 different routes they can take. We've got the construction one of the building services. So they've got to follow one of them. So if you look at the construction, we have 3 core units, which is 201, 202 and 203, and then 1 optional trade specific pathway. Now we have an example here of site carpentry, which in addition to the 3 core units is an additional 6 units. So that will make up that pathway. If we look at the building services engineering, again, the 3 core units, 201, 202 and 204, and then 1 optional trade specific pathway. For this example, we've got pathway A, which is plumbing and heating, which is 8 additional units. So what you've got to do is you've got to achieve a pass or a higher grade in the 3 assessments Kevin referred to earlier, and Ian will go into more detail shortly, and that is a total of 540 guided learning hours. We move on to the next one, please. So now we've got an example of how the units will be set out. So again, the ones in the blue at the top, 201, 202 and 203, they're the generic, and they will go across all of construction. Regardless of which trade area you go in, you will be doing 201, 202, 203. That's employment and employability in the construction sector, changing practices over time, planning and evaluating work in the construction sector in Wales. And then below that in the black, we have the trade specific units. So you can see what they are. Next slide, please, Ian. Now in this one, we've got an example now from Building Services Engineering. So again, the blue ones at the top are the generic ones that will go across all of building services, regardless of which trade you choose to pick. And again, it's employment and employability in the building services engineering sector, changing practices over times, planning and evaluating work in the building services engineering sector. Now, as you may recall from the last slide, these 3 are the same title. The only bias is towards, on this particular set, is building services engineering. On the previous slide, it was construction. These units are the same across them both, the construction and building services. The difference is there is a bias towards building services on these and construction on the others. And then at the bottom in the black, you can see there we've now got some examples of an electrical unit, or the electrical units that will sit within there. Next slide, please, Ian. Okay, as we said before, this qualification is 540 guided learning hours, okay? And that's split up with 100 guided learning hours on the core units, 378 on the pathway, so that's each trade will be the same, 378, and then 62 guided learning hours covering the assessment. So that's what you're going to do, the 540. Now, building up from that, the total qualification time, which includes the guided learning and any unsupervised activities that go on, that is 600 hours, and that equates to 60 credits. So that is the general build-up and make-up of the qualification, and that's the same for all of them. Next slide, please, Ian. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to briefly introduce you to the units and how they're set out. Now, whichever trade or whichever area you're going on, they're all going to be the same. So we're going to start off with the learning outcomes. You're all familiar with those, and these are large chunks of knowledge or practical skills that they need to do. So this is the large overarching statement at the top of what they must understand or they must be able to do following any teaching and learning. Below that, we have the criteria, which takes the learning outcomes and breaks them up into smaller areas that you can look at. So that then breaks it down smaller. And then below each of the criteria, or on some of the criteria, there will be range. So for example, in the plumbing, we could be talking about different types of pipe work. The range would then break that down, and it would be copper, plastic, low carbon steel, and so on. Now, the range, it's not an exhaustive list, it's trying to bring you in closer. So it's all the time bringing it down, helping with the learning, delivery, and the assessment of these units that we've got. Could you bring the next one up, please, Ian? Okay, within this one, we have the structure of the unit. So all the units are going to be set out the same. So at the top, we're going to have the unit number and the title. We're then going to have the guided learning hours for this particular unit. We're going to have a brief description of what we're going to be covering in this unit, and then we're going to have a summary of the learning outcomes. So from the front sheet, you can very quickly get a flavour for what we're going to be delivering, or you're going to be delivering over the next however many days or months, whatever it goes to. Can we have the next one, please, Ian? Okay, just building up from the slide before. So here we have a typical structure. So we have the learning outcome, know the changes in construction methods over time. And then as you can see the criteria, we're now talking pre-1919 and 21st century. So we can see how we started to split that top learning outcome up. And then underneath we've got the range. So if what we want to look at 2.1, we've got the pre-1919, we've got the range and the areas we want to look at in relation to that, and the same for 2.3. Then now what we're going to introduce you to is delivery outcomes. So this then will give you more guidance on what we expect the learner to know or be able to do after that learning has taken place. So 2.3 is related to obviously the criteria 2.3, but you can see now what the learner will know or be able to do. So again, we're just trying to give you that direction to help when you're delivering this and to help understand what the learner should be able to do, keeping that consistency across all the centres. Next slide, please, Ian. Now, again, what we've got here now, it's the same as before, but this is a trade specific. And what we're trying to demonstrate here is that it's the same throughout. So you'll get the same look and feel, regardless of which unit you're doing, it's the same look and feel. And it will be the same whether you're doing construction or BSc, you'll get the same look. So again, unit number and title, the guided learning hours, what it's about, and then a summary of the learning outcomes. Okay, so next slide, please, Ian. And I think on this slide, again, we go into the same as before. So we have the learning outcomes, criteria, range, and then delivery outcomes. So again, we've gone through this with you. This is just, again, just showing you another example that it's exactly the same, whether it's a core unit or a trade specific. Again, next slide, please. And this is where I'm going to hand you over to Ian, and he's going to go over into the summary of assessments with you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jason, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And as Jason says, I'm now going to touch on and provide you a brief overview of the summary of actually the assessments moving forward. So here we've got the progression in construction and building services is assessed using 3 assessment methods. We've got, first of all, as you can see, is the on-screen assessment, which covers a range of interactive elements, is externally set and auto-marked with an overall weighting of 20%. Then we have the practical project, and this will cover in the trade pathway that the learner is working towards, which is externally set and internally marked with an overall weighting of 60%. And then we have the guided discussion, which again, externally set with questions, internally marked, and has an overall weighting of 20%. Assessments can be taken on demand, and centres must ensure that learners have undertaken all the required teaching and learning and are adequately prepared to undertake each method of assessment. And before we move on, I would like to reinforce we will have an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments that will be available to be downloaded from the Skills for Wales websites within the next few weeks. Here you can see a range of on-screen assessment questions. The on-screen assessment will consist of a range of question types. There are some interactive elements that unfortunately I'm not able to replicate during today's webinar. They include clicking on images to select the appropriate area and dragging options into the correct order and selecting one from 4 options. The following questions are sample questions relating to solid plastering. So question 1, top left, is drag and drop. And the top right, question 2, is matching the hand tools to the type of finish to be applied to. And then we have question 3, which is including selecting one from the 4 options. In construction, there will be 45 multiple choice questions in total, and the learner will have 70 minutes to complete. In building services engineering, there will be 50 questions in total, and the learner will have 75 minutes to complete the assessment. And the test can be taken at any stage in the assessment process, although it is recommended it is completed prior to the practical project and guided discussion. On-screen assessments, although we have covered in our previous slide, is externally set and auto-marked with the results received the same day by the centre. The practical project is made up of 3 tasks that will require the learner to show their planning, performing and evaluation skills relating to the pathway the learner is working towards. A reminder that the project is externally set, internally marked and externally verified, and the practical project must be taken before the guided discussion. The time allocated for the project is 60 hours in total and is broken down to the 3 parts. 14 hours for the overall planning, 40 hours is allocated to the performing of the 3 tasks, and 6 hours for the evaluation. And again, this method of assessment is externally set, internally marked and externally verified. The assessor will use the practical project grading table with the assessment pack to calculate a provisional grade for the learner. And notification of this provisional grade will be given to the learner within 1 week of completion of the assessment. But like we've mentioned, we will provide more information and update on this in future webinars. Following completion of your practical project, you will be required to complete a guided discussion. The guided discussion will consist of 2 parts, completed in 1 time sitting, which will allow you to concentrate. Apologies, that seemed to go AWOL, did that? Let's go back, thank you. Will allow you to concentrate and go through and explore the knowledge and understanding of self-employment in their chosen area, and to review on and reflect on the tasks that have been undertaken. This method of assessment is internally marked and externally verified and will last for 40 minutes. The guided discussion can only take place once the learner has completed the practical project. Provisional grades for the practical project and guided discussion, as I've mentioned previously, must be provided to learners within 1 week of completion of each assessment. And guidance should be given around the provisional nature of these results, with recognition that they will undergo IQA and EQA activities and a final qualification grading by City and Guilds Construction and EAL for BSc. With regards to resubmission and resit of assessment, when a learner is unsuccessful in achieving a pass grade in any of the assessments, then they are permitted to resit or resubmit. If you would like to take a deeper dive in what I presented, you can by reading through the qualification handbook and the assessment pack, which will be located on the Skills for Wales website in the next few weeks. And before I am back to David, I would like to inform you that we will be providing a more in-depth guidance during the trade-specific webinars commencing the week commencing the 12th of April. I would now like to pass you on to David, who will take you through the next section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. We're going to have a look at some of the resources. You may have seen some of the supporting information in previous webinars, but I'll quickly cover some of this again for your consideration. So next slide, please, Ian. Firstly, to help with initial setup, we do have a resource document which gives an overview of the requirements to deliver and to offer the qualifications. So please access this document if you're planning any meetings to help answer those questions on resources and staffing. We also have a prospectus which will help centres create their own promotional literature and help provide information for learners, parents and employers. As we move on to the next slide, we can see the adaptable delivery planner. We do have an exemplar, but it's likely that each centre will consider delivery differently, such as the duration you run each unit, when you're building practical, etc. The planner has a row for you to input your units and then the weeks to tick off when each unit is delivered and in which term, etc. But on this next slide, we can see the exemplar. You may use this as a guide, but we recommend you have a look at this and adapt it to suit your own delivery. On the next slide, you will see support for your CPD. We will be releasing a quarterly newsletter with links to various opportunities to engage with learning. These may be links to dedicated videos or manufacturers or just updates and news, but a variety of support links to support you. Next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. We are creating a resource section on the Skills for Wales website to collate learning resources from third parties such as providers and centres. We will also link to relevant courses from trades and industry bodies such as the CITB, CIPHE, NFB, various e-learning, etc. The slide you can see on screen now shows some of the dates you can expect to see the materials come out. So new tutor resources and CPD resources in April, May 21, delivery and assessment guidance in September 21, and the employer and the CPD materials this April. Next slide, please, Ian. We have a completely new suite of tutor resources, and you can see on this slide. These have been offered for review and include typical support materials such as presentations and question papers. If you're still interested in viewing some of these, please do get in touch. Next slide, please, Ian. Hodder Education are delighted to showcase this new resource. So this is our new textbook. There will be this is a dedicated foundation book created to support delivery and learning across all 6 core units. There is a sample chapter which can be accessed through the link on the slide. In addition, Hodder are creating free mapping documents into the current trade-specific textbooks so they can be used with the new suite of qualifications. So that's helpful if you have the current books. You won't have to buy new books. There will be this guide to help signpost where that material can be found. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you again in just a moment, but I'd like to hand you over to my colleague Susan to take you through the next section.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well and keeping safe. So I'd just like to take you through the approval side of things then. So if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, please. Okay, so you may have seen this slide before. This gives a broad overview of the approval steps, the approval journey for centres then. So the application form for approval is available on the Skills for Wales website, and the link there for that application form is on there. Now, that application form is for both awarding bodies and for all qualifications, so it is one application form. And on completion, it's to be submitted to a central email inbox, which is skillsforwales.quality@cityandguilds.com. The application form, when we receive it, will be reviewed by the quality teams for both awarding bodies then, and we may come back to ask for additional information, perhaps if there's sections missing on it. Once the completed application form has been accepted, an EQA, an external quality assurer, will be allocated to complete a remote approval activity then. The EQA would complete an approval report, and that would outline the recommendations for approval. So it would include what was seen on the activity, who was spoken to, if the requirements have been met. The report will be shared with centres by the quality teams. So the EQA submits the report to each awarding body, and there's complete transparency throughout the approval process then. The approval decision will be communicated in writing to centres, and it will outline if there are any actions for centres to follow up, then what those actions are, who says to complete them, by when, and there'll be smart actions that will be applied then. Would you mind moving on, please, Ian? Thank you. So the approval journey for these qualifications is different. These are brand new qualifications, and it is an offline application form that has to be completed in the Become a Centre section of the website. Now, there is going to be additional information being added to that website soon, so we'll have centre FAQs, there's going to be an admin guide. At the moment, though, there is a guidance document to help with the completion of the application forms. Now, the reason for there being an offline application is that it is one form for all qualifications for both awarding bodies, so centres only need to complete one application form then. Now, although it's an offline form, the content, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise to anyone. It's the same information that most awarding bodies would normally look for, it's just that we're asking for it in a different format. So centres can submit the application forms right now and be ready to register from the 1st of September when the qualifications go live. So instead of having to wait until the qualifications are available on Walled Garden and Smarter Touch, you can apply now for them. And there's also the fact that the City and Guilds and EAL systems cannot be aligned, so that's why we have this offline form as well. Now, for current and existing centres, an application form must be completed then. So having approval for what will become legacy qualifications will not exempt centres then. And sub-centres must also submit approval applications. So it is one application form per qualification number. There will be no approval, or there will be no fee, sorry, for centre and qualification approval. And you're probably aware that the qualifications will not get direct claim status or low risk status for at least 2 years, as directed by Qualifications Wales. So it means the EQA sampling must be completed before certificates can be claimed. Now, although the application process is offline, the expectation is that Walled Garden and Smarter Touch will be used for the sampling activities, so it will be business as usual for the sampling activities as of next year. Do you mind going on to the next slide, please, Ian? Okay. So going back to the approval journey then. So from receipt of a completed application form, we expect that centres will get a decision within 30 working days about whether the approval has been granted or not then. As mentioned previously, separate approvals must be submitted for each centre, so one centre number, one application. And centres can adapt what they have, activity planners, sampling plans, etc. So they can use the documentation available from the awarding bodies, or they can already use what they have then. And David and Ian, the team, have produced some really good documents as well. The centres can choose to apply for all qualifications, so that's the foundation, the progression and the level 3, but at the moment we can only approve the foundation. So when we receive an application form, we will contact centres to find out when they want to proceed with the approval and how they want to do that then. So it is absolutely fine to split the approvals and have the foundation first and then perhaps the progression and the level 3 at a later date then. Now, the application form itself, it does ask for a section where centres include details of any assessment sites they know at the point of application. If that's not known at this point, and we don't expect centres to know that, it will not hold up an application form, so that can be shared with the awarding body once the centres know where these assessment sites are. Can I have the next slide, please, Ian? Oh, thank you. Sorry, I don't think that one's for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to now pass you back to David. So thank you, Susan.
Sorry.
Thank you, David.
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Susan. Well, just a few more slides before we break for questions. Here we can see several key dates. A couple I would like to highlight are the overview teaching and learning webinars planned for May 21, with some follow-up sessions, hopefully face-to-face if we can by then, to follow in the next academic year. And also the go live and first teaching date of September 2021. So not too far away now. Thank you, Ian. On this slide, we can see the transition requirements. So these have been discussed before, and Qualification Wales have ran webinars on these, which are available to view. But just a brief recap. A learner completing a broad level 1 qualification this year, it's suggested, could progress onto the foundation. Someone completing a trade-specific level 1 may progress to the foundation or the progression. This would depend on the suitability of the learner to go into the progression at that stage. A learner completing a level 2 trade-specific this year may progress to the progression or level 3 trade-specific. There are also other options, and we suggest you consider this diagram when considering suitable destinations for learners. Moving on to the next slide. This slide shows the journey for learners starting in 2022, showing broad level 1 and foundation as suitable starting points and the new apprenticeship for learners who are employed. Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please, Ian? Here we have a link to all future webinars. Please take a look at the section of support and register for suitable webinars. You can see also the dates. So on the side, you can see roof, plastering, electrotechnical, plumbing and heating, with the options for dates and times. And there's a link there direct to those. So if you can have a look at those when you get a chance and share it with friends and colleagues and register for the webinars. If you register and you're not able to attend, it will send you a link following the webinar with a link to the recording. So it's worthwhile registering your interest anyway. Thank you, Ian. And on the final slide, before we move to questions, shows the new qualifications along with some various links. We can also see the dates which I mentioned just earlier, and we mentioned again the transition rules and the funding towards those transition rules, and the period of transition and the period of dual running. Thank you, Ian. So next slide, please. So this slide shows the qualifications and subsequently the go live dates. And this slide is particularly helpful because it has various links in the table. So when you're looking at some of these qualifications, you want further information. If you've not been able to find it, if you access this table and follow those links to letters to centres from QW and the infographic that we've shown on the slide, which is very, very helpful when you're having discussions around the transitional arrangements for your learners. Thank you very much, Ian. If we can move to what I think is the questions slide. So there's been a lot of information there that the panel have gone through. So thank you very much to the panel for your presentations, and apologies about some of the slides and some of the technical issues. It sometimes happens. There's been a little bit of feedback that sometimes where our description doesn't match the slide. I think some may have been jumping ahead, and sometimes there's a lag when somebody else is presenting the actual presentation. So we will check that out before the next one and make sure that we can sort that out and correct those little issues. So thank you very much for that feedback. But what I'm going to do in a moment, I'm going to open up the questions tab, and any thoughts, any feedback, any questions that you may have on any of the topics discussed by the panel today, please type those in. If you'd like to describe them as well, we can unmute you. There's not big numbers on this particular webinar, so we can open up the microphone and you can have a chat to us or just make a statement. Any review topics that you'd like us to consider, please do so. So just pause for a moment whilst we do, whilst you think of some of those questions, and please do type away. Whilst we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, if I could pose a question to Paul from EL, please. Hi, Paul. I know you've done a lot of work in the background developing and supporting the whole team on the development of these qualifications. Could you just give us a brief overview of some of the input and some of the work that's gone into the development so far, please, Paul?
Yeah, I can definitely do that, David. It has been quite a journey for us. As you remember back to the beginning of the slide where Kevin was talking about the sector review. The result of the sector review, we took over as a partnership, City and Guilds and EEL, over 2 years ago now. So we've had a team on the project over 2 years, working closely with Qualifications Wales and other sector bodies such as CITB and the BAC network, ECA, and many of the plumbing networks as well, to make sure that the qualifications were developed in line with what the sector review wanted, what Qualifications Wales wanted, and what the industry wanted. Obviously, there's some areas of conflict in there where what one party wants isn't the same as what other parties want. So, you know, we put an awful lot of time and effort into making sure that it's as good as it can be, and we've got a fantastic product going forward. So we've had, you know, my team of technical experts, the City and Guilds team have got access to technical experts who have written all the content in line with what we'd expect, and they've written those assessments for the progression qualification as well, and the online on-screen tests. So we're confident that what we've got meets the requirements of the industry, but we are also aware that it is a change for a lot of people and it may be quite daunting. So we're here to talk you through that and help.
Lovely, thank you very much, Paul. That's helpful insight from your perspective. So thank you very much. We do have a couple of questions. The first one, if I could put this to Jason Marsland, please. Jason, there's a question around refrigeration and air conditioning and the qualifications that have been run for many years now through apprenticeships. And we haven't covered that specific trade area in this presentation. Can you describe some of the background and the changes that are happening in that specific sector, please?
That area now, that wasn't one that was focused on initially. That may be brought in later as we progress further. I think, to be fair, Kevin may have a closer touch with it because he's been working with the heating and vent and BISA. So possibly Kevin, maybe I'll be able to add more onto that one.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In terms of it's something that could be, it was what was deemed a low uptake trade, and it's not to say it's less important, absolutely not. We did look at the numbers, and we have looked at these quite thoroughly with Qualifications Wales. So I think if there is a case for any low uptake trade or emerging trades, we will work with Qualifications Wales to get those developed where there is a case for that. So I probably couldn't give you the specific answer you're looking for at the moment because I don't have it. But what I could do, if we got the details, David, of the person that's asked this, or we'll have some information shared afterwards, we'll reconvene separately, and I'll investigate that accordingly.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. If anyone's got any specific questions you'd like following up on after this webinar, you can drop it into the questions tab and I'll share those with the appropriate colleagues, or you could email Skills for Wales. So that's a really handy email address, and put it for forwarding attention of Kevin Sparrow, and then we'll have it logged then, Kevin, through the Skills for Wales. So it'll be a logged request, and it'll give you a chance then to find any information and share that. A few more questions come in. The next one I can probably answer. So unfortunately, the webinars I need to present, need to be present at, are on dates in April, and I'll be teaching back then. We understand this. It's very difficult sometimes coming up with appropriate times and dates for webinars, because some days suit some staff more than they suit others. So we try to change them around a little bit to try and rotate them to accommodate different requests and requirements. But if you register for the webinar anyway, what will happen is, as soon as the webinar finishes, within a couple of hours, once the video has been processed, it will save the video and send you a direct link to it. So I always recommend people who are interested to register anyway. Great if you can get on live, it's far better, much more engaging and fulfilling if you can attend live and you can ask live questions. But at least if you can't do that, you do get a direct link to the webinar recording. So apologies about that. It's always going to be difficult to please everyone with times. A question for Ian: how strictly will the GLH need to be adhered to when planning the programme, and will it be part of the quality assurance process?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think what we have to be careful of, and we've got to be pretty clear on this, is that the design and of the content of the particular units and the methods of assessments have been set, and that's what the projected numbers will be, is the 540. We all 540 guided learning hours, which equates to the assessments, the core units, and then the 398 hours for the trait specific units moving forward. And of course, then you've got the 62 hours on the assessments. What we have to remember is, and it's always difficult, is that if you could have the same batch of learners on the same conveyor belt coming off, then you could be guaranteed every learner having to achieve within the 540 hours. Some will take slightly longer, some may take less. And that's why it is the guided approach as you move forward. And what we have to remember is that all learners learn at different stages as they're moving forward. Not so much so with the knowledge and understanding, but more on the skills level to see that happen. So you will see some learners, or we will see some learners take less than the 540 hours, especially on the learning. But when you look at the assessments, we have no doubt that they will require the actual 62 hours to help them move forward. Like we've said, the 62 hours on the assessment, which is the 40 hours on the project, and then on the project, and then you've got the guided discussion, and then the knowledge, and then on top of that, then of course you've got your knowledge test to move forward. But on your project, like we've already mentioned, you're 40 hours on the actual performing, and you've got 14 hours on the planning. And what we have to remember as well is that the 14 hours on the planning, if they take less than that, it can't be added on to the actual performing or the evaluating moving forward. So I can understand people's concerns on the guided learning hours, but it is a guide. And what we have to remember is, like I've mentioned earlier, learners do learn at different times and approaches. We've all got different styles to be able to pick things up and move things forward. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. We've got another question. I'll read it out in full first, and then I'll try and break it down into sections. So why hasn't there been a stipulation that potential progression learners must complete the foundation qualification first? This has been a continual problem with unprepared and unsuitable learners being enrolled straight onto level 2 courses. So there's a couple of points to pick out there. The first bit, and then I think I'll open it up to the panel because we can continue to answer this in a variety of different ways. The first one is registration of unsuitable learners. I think most centres have requirements for any type of progression or entrance point where you'll interview learners, look at previous results, take on board a variety of information, and then make a judgment on which is the most suitable qualification, course and level for that particular learner. It's very difficult to have, a bit like GLH, one size fits all definitive requirement. So there's often some flexibility in this because it's the centres who know the learners better. They're the ones doing the interviews and maybe have experience of them being on courses before. The other part of your question about the foundation, if you look at any of the flow charts that we offer, it always shows foundation, progression, apprenticeship. Now, I think if a learner did the progression without the foundation and went into an apprenticeship, they still have to go back and do all the core units. So I'm not sure there'd be any advantage to that. I'm not sure I've ever seen that on anyone's planning as such. The foundation is there with the purpose of offering a broad foundation for those learners. So it wouldn't be a good plan really if the learners are unsuitable to go to progression and then maybe have to double back. But if I can open that up to the panel, maybe someone else can give a slightly different perspective or possibly a better answer to that. Would anyone like to add to that? Maybe Paul or Ian?
Sorry, David, I'm having slight problems with unmuting myself.
That's okay.
Amicably, to be honest, and where you've put that over. I think what we've got to be careful of is, rightly so, is making sure the learner is ready to go on to the progression. We're all aware the difficulties that not all learners may even be ready to start the foundation, and that's why they put in like a pre-level 1 qualification in place prior to the foundation for learners that aren't ready to go straight onto the foundation. And what we've got to be careful of is what we have been doing for the last few decades, is ensuring that the learner is ready and prepared to do a specific qualification to be able to move forward. The foundation qualification will give them that, it will provide the opportunity for learners to have a good broad knowledge and understanding and get them prepared and ready for the progression to be able to move forward. And we've got to remember as well that the progression qualification is linked directly in line with the occupational competency statements. So it is a smooth transition when they move across to the level 3 when we finally get there and the final development process. So, and that would be my answer really, is to, wherever possible, ensure that the learner is ready to be able to prepare to go towards the progression, and any mop-up or any top-up that they may require. And by completing the foundation, we will definitely be able to confirm that the learner will be ready to go straight onto the progression qualification. And that's the more accurate route to go down. And it will make the learner a better knowledge and understanding and help develop the skills element as well to be able to move that forward. So that's, thank you, David.
No, thank you very much, Ian. That's helped add to that reply. We've got a couple more questions. I'm just going to jump one because it's kind of a follow-up to the one we've just answered. Where will learners completing the new GCSE in CBSE progress to, the foundation or the progression? I'm not as familiar with the GCSE content, but it's my belief that that is more knowledge based, and the foundation has specific units from trades, and those parts involve a lot of practical, so it's more practical based with slightly different content, I suspect. So I would assume that it is still the foundation as the entry point, but if anyone in the panel disagrees or has other information, please do let me know.
I've got a bit of help with that.
Thanks,
David.
Paul.
Yeah, so the foundation qualification is likely to be, and we say likely, but 90% likely to be part of the apprenticeship as a whole, a prerequisite for the apprenticeship. So anyone who's completed GCSE will, is, although not completely irrelevant as far as the learner's experience in the context of the apprenticeship, it won't mean that they can move straight onto the progression. The foundation is the right place for them.
Thank you very much.
Those learners who can't get an apprenticeship.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's an additional point there that that's very well made, that the foundation is nested almost into an apprenticeship called the core. So it's the core units of the foundation. So it's still a requirement for someone who's progressing through this journey and through this flow chart into the apprenticeship and hopefully on to successful completion. But we have another question. So if a student has completed the construction progression, but then needs to swap to BSc, will they need to redo the BSc 201, for example, in the progression? So that's probably a question for Jason and Kevin. So I think what we're getting at here is that learners initially wanted to do construction and completed the construction progression. They've been successful in getting an apprenticeship, but in a BSc discipline. And how much of what they've covered in the progression will they be able to take across or exempt them from assessments within their chosen BSc apprenticeship, if any?
I think I can answer this, David.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, because Jason and we've been working on these documents, so I'm familiar with the statements, and there is information in our qualification manuals and handbooks in relation to this. So if the learner is switching from construction to BSc or vice versa, because there is the same test within the progression, the test 1, which also sits in the apprenticeship qualification, the learner will have to redo that test 1. But the learner won't be at a massive disadvantage totally, because they could actually undertake a more expedient course of study, because if they've, for example, as Jason described, covered the core units in construction, for example, employment and employability or changing practices over time and those sorts of units, because they share quite a lot of content to the building services unit, they'll be much more familiar to be able to, what I would consider to go on a more truncated course of study to then undertake the test 1 in the other trade area. And also the same position would be the case if, for example, within BSc, if a learner did the progression qualification in a plumbing pathway and brilliantly got a job or, an apprenticeship as an electrician, they still quite rightly wouldn't be exempt from the test 1 in the apprenticeship qualification, because the test that they would have done in progression level would be based on progression or plumbing standards, not electrotechnical. So hopefully that answers that one. So there's a bit of work to do there, but there is some transferability because of the synergy between the content in the units.
That's very helpful. Thanks for that insight, Kevin. I think as we start to run with these new courses and knowing the transition requirements within courses and the exams and the assessments within the qualification and what can come across, it'll be a lot slicker once we understand it a little bit more. And when centres become more experienced in the delivery of these qualifications and people transferring from construction to BSc and vice versa, we want to give the opportunity and the flexibility for the learners and open up more doors. But there may be a little bit of recapping because not all of the assessments may have been taken with that initial pathway. So I think what you've described there seems that we've got the balance hopefully a bit better than we possibly have with the current structure. So hopefully that's a benefit of the new suite of qualifications. Thanks very much, Kevin. Well, the questions have dried up a little bit for now. So what we'll do is we won't make you sit on there any longer than you need to. We will allow you a few more moments or minutes to think about any further questions that you may have. We can also allow the panel to make any further points that they may feel they want to get across and maybe they haven't done so far. So if everyone can start having to think about questions or any further points they'd like to make, we can just continue with the webinar for a short time, and if it comes to a natural end, then we can all maybe go and get an extra cup of tea before our next meetings or classes. Ian, do we have the Skills for Wales email address on the next slide? Is it worth showing that at this moment? Okay, well, there's a slide talking about the feedback. You know, your feedback is really, really helpful. We do value your feedback, so please do take the time to share your thoughts. We do build our future support sessions, and there's still some slight changes we can make to things based on your thoughts, your feedback, and your insights. So please do make sure you get in touch with us following this. And the slide that Ian's showing there shows the email address we've promoted several times throughout this presentation. So please, again, make a note of that, and any further questions after today or any extra clarity, please do get in touch with us there. But we do have another question. I think it's a follow-up question, so I'll read this out. Understand your response, but enrolments are controlled by those outside of the Department of Academic Learning. FE is driven by numbers and funding which go against the proposed suite of qualifications being introduced to raise standards. Only clear learning pathways by Skills for Wales will stop this habit and produce better prepared tradespeople. We can live in hope. Thanks for the webinar. No, you do make a very good point, and we understand most of the panel, if not all, have worked in FE colleges before, so we understand the pressures that come with working in a large FE college and the pressures of successes and funding. But hopefully what we can do is create a suitable suite of qualifications, and some of these issues we may not be able to fix. It may be issues for certain centres to address themselves, but we do need to ensure that our advice and guidance as a consortium is correct, and that Qualification Wales are helping us put together a suite of options, opportunities, qualifications and apprenticeships for the variety of learners that we've discussed throughout this presentation. So sorry we can't get too involved with internal practices at centres. You mentioned funding. I think if centres were looking to maximise funding, then it would be a benefit to put them on the foundation before the progression, because you wouldn't be jumping an extra year. So hopefully that doesn't drive poor practice the way that the qualifications have been put together. Is any of the panel can add to that, or do you think that answers as much as we can at this moment in time?
I think you've answered it accordingly, David, and adequately, to be honest, because like you've said, it's difficult position that people are put in at times, but that's for the colleges themselves to address and move that forward. And I know they're looking into this, aren't they, because of the design of the new suite of qualifications, that they are slightly concerned to ensure that the learner is on the right course to be able to move forward. So, and I've no doubt that colleges are already building this in to what their initial planning will be. So we may see a change compared to what they're used to being having to do at this moment in time.
Thanks, Ian. I'll just unmute you for a moment, Andrew. If you just let us know if that's if I've understood your question or query correctly. You are unmuted by myself. You'd have to unmute yourself as well, as go to unmute at both ends of the webinar. So if you're still on and can hear us, if you can just let us know if I understood your question correctly, and if there's anything we can expand on, please let us know. So you're still self-muted, but if you're having problems, technical problems, that's fine. Oh, it looks as though you're muted now,
on my phone. Can you hear me now?
Right. Yeah, hi Andrew, you okay? It's not always easy from the phone, is it?
No. Yeah, that I understand that. That's fine. It's just that looking at it, which is great, some of the things, particularly with the electrical part of it, is the science and principles, and that has been a massive gap, if you like, between the difference of level 1 to level 2, but now between foundation and even with the apprentices, that it is it's a bit shocking, really, if you like. And the hope was that with these suites, this gap that you have between, they're all capable, just they haven't been challenged enough to bring it closer together. So that it does end up with this more rounded, what we shouldn't be doing, spending loads and loads of time trying to get them to do basic science and principles, and we should be focusing on the trade specific skills. But it seems to be the other way around at this particular moment, which is the only really thing that I would, you know, from my concerns, if you like, looking at from the level 1, the level 2 and the level 3 and how this is now being put in. I mean, I've had a good read through these proposals, and I understand that's an internal thing for most FE colleges. It's just that with this written by yourselves and EAL with Skills for Wales, Qualification for Wales, that it's like anything, isn't it? If it's directed, and then that's what we go towards. But I understand your
points, Andrew.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sorry, but yeah, I understand your answers, David, and Ian's. That's fine. It's just we spend so much time trying to do these science and principles aspects that really we haven't got enough time to focus on what they need to be the tradesperson.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think that's a very valid feedback, particularly in BSc and particularly electrical. Although I've seen it come up in some other trades as well, that some of the scientific and technical principles are at quite a high level, and they need to be now with some of the complex systems that are installed within the apprenticeships, are quite advanced technology now within some of the trades. So it does put tutors under a bit of extra pressure to bring many learners up to that level. I hope that the foundation doesn't take time away from that. It gives a broad base of knowledge that can be built on, and hopefully allow you some further time to do those more advanced technical and scientific things, because you've covered a large base of knowledge before progressing. So hopefully as we deliver it, it will unfold and we'll find better ways and the most appropriate ways of delivering it. But it's something that not only we have to be mindful of. I'm glad you've described that to everyone, because it's good for everyone to hear some of those challenges, because other people are probably thinking the same, and if we can support each other, it just makes it easier for everyone. So thank you very much. Is anyone else like to ask another question, or if you've not had your question answered satisfactorily, or you want to build on that question, please just drop a note in, and I can unmute you and you can chat through it if you prefer to do that, or just type in a question if you prefer.
Or if anybody would like put any more suggestions forward, David, or any points of view that they have. It doesn't have to be a question, does it? If they want to, a topic that they want to discuss openly.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Good point. That can be more valuable sometimes. It's just a discussion point or an observation somebody has made, you know, like the scientific principles. It's not a problem that will go away. It needs to be done. So it's good that we have a chat about it and we're all aware of it. And sometimes we get a great solution. Sometimes we just have to work on the best solution we can. And that's often what you find. But I'm quite confident, having gone through this a few times now, that I can see a nice flow and a nice pattern to the structure of this new suite of qualifications. So I'm quietly confident it'll be successful. But you know, if other people see it differently, then it'd be great to have that discussion.
David, I was just sorry to interject. I was just going to say, in response to Andrew's brilliant points there, I could definitely speak to him after the webinar at some convenient time, and that would be great to get his feedback in relation to the science and principles as well.
That's excellent. Thanks, Kevin. So Andrew, if you don't mind, I think the easiest way for that for us to log it and then we can officially set something up is to use the Skills for Wales email address, and we'll link those up, Kevin. It's really helpful, I think, before we do the trade-specific webinars, because that's something you can maybe put on a slide or have as a discussion topic, Kevin. The other trades, the construction trades, plumbing, brickwork, plastering, all those other trades, are the specific topics that maybe you're concerned about, and again, maybe just drop those in. We might not have an answer today, but we can try and build on those when we run the trade-specific webinars. So you don't have to drop those in now. You may think of those after today. Drop them on an email and we'll build it into our future webinars as we can. Well, there's no other queries, comments or thoughts coming through just yet. So what I suggest we do is just give it a few final moments and then we'll close. But whilst we're just waiting for any final comments to come in, just a big thank you to everyone for attending. We know you're under pressure with work back at your centres. It's taking time out of your day to come and listen to us. We hope it's been valuable and you've taken something through it out of the session. Please share your feedback, anything we can build on and improve, please let us know. But once again, from the whole panel, and Harrod, and Susan, and all the speakers who've helped answer the questions, a big thank you for your time today. Thank you to the panelists for your time, and we enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy your evening, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Goodbye, everyone.